Welcome to today's presentation for the Ohio Local Government Cyber Standards by CBTS. With us today, we have CBTS Consulting CISOs David Leach and John Brueggemann. Take it away, guys.
Well, good morning, everybody. So here we are to cover House Bill 96. Little bit of an agenda here. We'll do a quick round of introductions, talk very briefly around the legislation, what it means, and then jump into the meat here, which is, talking about NIST CSF, CIS, and how we use those to build a program through a 5-step program approach. So that we'll give you some tips around how you can do it yourself and show you how we would do it and how we actually do it when we're consulting with local entities and commercial organizations. Show you a little bit around an example format report, and then dig in a little bit more into some assessment tips. What you'll find, we'll send out the deck after the session. There's some takeaway information there, some further definitions, links into some really good resources from the state of Ohio itself, and then obviously some contact information if you need further guidance. So as we jump into those introductions, first thing is, myself and John are not lawyers. So, we're a technology service. Please don't take anything that we say as legal advice. Go and speak to your own legal counsel or general counsel, whatever label you use there, around some of the definitions and some of the statutes. In terms of jumping into the introductions, CBTS, as it says here, we're a services company delivering AI-enabled services, empowering public sector and enterprises across North America, and driving innovation. In other words, we're a full stack IT services company. We're definitely not small. Somewhere around about 3,000 clients across 50 states, 2,500 employees in round numbers, and about the same number of technology certifications. I think at revenue-wise, we're over the 1 billion point at this point in time. So think of us as as an up-and-coming global services company.
Correct.
So I'm talking here, obviously, David Leach. Good to meet you. Been around in the IT space for way too many years. And although I am now resident out in Colorado, actually I first came to the Dayton and Cincinnati area as part of my Royal Air Force or British Ministry of Defence Service, where I was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I've had the privilege of serving not only the defence industrial base here in the USA, but also finance, retail, healthcare, and pharmaceutical companies. Over sort of 20 years of civilian service. So, John, over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, David. John Brueggemann, 35 years of IT experience. I've been doing this since I was in college, and I have 24 years of cybersecurity experience. I got involved in cybersecurity in 2001 when the school's IT network I was managing got hit with a distributed denial of service attack over a weekend, May 2001. I came into the office. I thought the Exchange server was down and it was fine, but we were getting no response from it. So then I looked at my voicemail and I had like 9 voicemails on a Sunday morning, which was weird. And the first 3 were from the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, and the Department of Education. And they all asked the same question: why are you scanning every one of our IP addresses? So from that, I discovered you're only as secure as your weakest link, and got me into cybersecurity. And that was basically 24 years ago. So my background is in higher education. I'm used to doing a lot with virtually no money. So nonprofit experience, if you are a nonprofit or a governmental agency, we're here to help.
Thank you, John. So I think Ryan introduced earlier on, as we go through this, please do, if you've got any questions for us, put them into the chat. You should be able to see that either on the top or the right-hand side of the webinar interface that you're looking at the moment. And we will try and take those as we go, and that will allow us to address any topical questions you've got, and really make this meaningful for you so that you can get the maximum benefit out of the session. So please do feel free to put those questions in. They will be anonymized. So as we say in the education space, no such thing as a stupid question, John.
There is no such thing as a stupid question, for sure. So please, fire away.
Okay. So as we look at this legislation, just really setting the scene here, What is it all about? You can get into a lot of detail here pretty clearly. And down at the bottom there's a reference to an Auditor of State Bulletin 2025-07. That provides a great deal of further detail. But in essence, the legislation says that any entity, any state entity, needs to adopt a cybersecurity program to safeguard data, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And it references two best practice frameworks, NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF, and the Center for Internet Security Standards, the CIS 18. We'll talk about those in a little bit more detail, but what's important here is that you base your program on something. You can make up your own. You don't actually have to.
You could. I wouldn't recommend it.
Absolutely. But you could use ISO, you could use any other standard out there. They just call those two out as being the two recommended.
Right, because one of the problems that a lot of people have is they don't know where to start. It can feel like a really overwhelming topic. Cybersecurity, you might think that, oh my God, we're always going to be attacked, which is a true statement, but you might not know where to begin. And the good thing about the frameworks is that it tells you, here are the basic, what we like to call cybersecurity hygiene that you should do. So if you don't know where to begin, you can just Google NIST Cybersecurity Framework, the CSF 2.0, or the Center for Internet Security. Both of these are free resources. Get them, look at them. If that makes sense, great. You can go and do this yourself. If it doesn't make sense, call a friend, call us.
Absolutely. And so we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on, John. The important thing here is that you need to make a formal adoption. So you're going to have to make a statement. Your entity is going to have to make a declaration that you are adopting and you are driving towards a cybersecurity program. We'll talk about what that means and timelines for doing that. What I would say, though, is as you make that announcement in your legislature, in your governing body, whatever sort of entity you are, that you include just the fact that you're actually adopting a program, perhaps the framework you're going to follow, and who the responsible person is. Please do not put all of the details into that announcement, because that's just going to tell the bad guys, the adversaries, the threat actors, kind of where your weak points are. So that's the adoption of a program. One of the other key elements within the legislation is that it did not outlaw ransomware, but what it says is that ransomware payments have to be approved by the legislative authority. So again, be prepared, know whether or not you're going to be making ransomware. Is it something that you would even entertain?
Which is a good question. And so imagine you're the mayor of a small city or whatever. You have to make the decision at the executive level to say, we're not going to pay a ransomware. You can make that statement. That's great. You just have to make sure it's clear to everybody involved that you're not going to pay a ransomware payment and then declare it. Yep. So you can also say, we might pay a ransomware depending on what was attacked. And there's been enough state and local governments that have been attacked, not just here in the United States, but around the world, that it is a real threat. It's not a could be. You are definitely your external assets are being attacked. They're being probed. And it's if you're not doing anything to protect them, you're likely going to experience a ransomware type event. So.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think the truth is, though, neither John or I or CBTS really would recommend paying a ransomware. No. It is a last course, last ditch item. Clearly, the more people that pay ransomware, the more the issue prevails.
Right. If the ransomware, the criminals, I mean, I tend to call them criminals because they're doing a criminal act. They have an incentive. Their incentive is to make money. And by encrypting your data, by attacking your infrastructure, that's how they make money. If you take away the incentive, if you don't pay the ransom, the incentive goes away. They have other tactics. They'll say that they're going to release the data, so now it becomes an extortion event. That's also a problem. You want to consider that, but that's a whole longer conversation. Yeah. But you have to make the decision in your head, and we would certainly recommend not to pay the ransom.
And then, the third real key part of the legislation is around cyber incident notification, and there are requirements to notify the Executive Director of Homeland Security through the Ohio Cyber Integration Center. And there is a link later on in the deck that when we send it out, you'll see links to these reporting points within 7 days or no later than 7 days after the discovery. And then notifying the Ohio Auditor of State within 30 days. And we'll cover, I think, on the next slide, the definition of a cyber incident.
Right.
But these are the key components of the bill as they stand at the moment. So when we look at the bill, coverage or applicability, all subdivisions, lots of words here, townships, municipalities, school districts, etc., water authorities. I think the way that I would sum that up, and the Auditor of State said it, if you are receiving money from the state of Ohio and are subject to audit by the Office of the State Auditor, this legislation applies to you.
Right. That's much easier to understand. If you're getting money from the state of Ohio and you're being audited by the state of Ohio, this applies to you.
So anyway, again, not legal advice, but
right.
That's how we read it, and that's how the guidance is coming out from the state auditor. In terms of timeline, so already past due is incident reporting. So if you suffer an incident, you are already legally required to report it to the state. That came into effect on the 30th of September. Counties and cities then need to have adopted a program then as per the legislation by the 1st of January, and then all other political subdivisions, visitor centers, again, anybody who receives money doesn't fall into the counties and cities. You need to have announced your program and have it in place by the 1st of July. Now,
which is coming up very quickly. So the big one will be for counties and cities. So, and again, you have to say that you're going to follow a framework. You just declare which framework you're going to follow, and then put it into effect in whatever mechanism you have to put it in effect. And the way we tend to do this is from the standpoint of helping people is you say you're going to align to a framework, and then you begin the process of aligning to the framework. We don't expect you to have a program in place by January 1st, but you declare what you're going to do by January 1st.
Absolutely. And this is not a one-size-fits-all mechanism. All of these standards, we're all risk-based, and we'll talk about that somewhat as well. So,
yes.
What will be required for a larger municipality will be very different than that example I gave earlier on about a visitor center.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay, so that's the timeline. Definition of a cyber incident, substantial loss of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, those are
sounds like legal words.
Those are pretty big words, aren't they, John? So yes. Confidentiality is pretty clear. Availability of systems is pretty clear. I would recommend taking some legal advice around, do you have to declare an incident if one of your internal team takes mail out by a misconfiguration? Is that a cybersecurity incident or not? Different legal interpretations will be different. So
right.
Work this out before you have an incident is the advice here. And then integrity is is the data maintained in its correct state? Has somebody gone in and manipulated or
modified your taxes that you're supposed to pay, increased them, decreased them? Maybe they've modified what you paid. So, when you think of integrity, the thing that I tend to remind people about is, the students that wanted to change their grades. They got a D and they wanted to get an A, so they hack into the system and they've changed the letter grade from a D to an A. That's modifying the integrity of the grading system. So whatever you're doing, it could be modifying a bill, it could be modifying a payment. There's all sorts of things that can be modified in terms of the integrity, and you want to maintain the integrity, but you also have to know that the integrity has changed. That's a different question. But yeah, when you have an incident, and that's a really good point, David, about if you apply a patch to your server and the server goes down because the patch did something you weren't expecting, is that an incident? I would say it probably is. Again, not legal advice. It probably is if it extends more than a day.
Well, I don't think that goes on to to kind of substantial loss. What is the definition of substantial loss? And we deal, by the way, with these sort of definitions. We deal with it within companies that have to report to the SEC.
Yes.
We deal with a slightly different definition, within
PCI
within
compliance.
PCI, within HIPAA, et cetera, et cetera. And they all follow a very similar sort of flow here. And the next one here that is crucially important here in the public services space is serious impact on safety and resiliency of your services.
Right.
Pretty clearly, if you've got an impact here to a water system or to a police,
Right.
or a
911
911
services.
system, etc., then that would fall into that second category of serious impact. I actually think personally, the third bullet, disruption of entities' ability to engage, is really a duplicate of the availability piece at bullet one, but it's called out there, within the legislation. And the last one then is unauthorized access. Again, a little bit of a duplicate to a breach of confidentiality. But if you've got a threat actor that is actually inside your system, is reading your data, reading your documents, then that falls into that last category. They do call out that cybersecurity incidents are not mere threats.
Right.
So which is really interesting. So if you get a ransomware note, but there's no proof that the threat actor is inside your system,
And your system is not down.
it's not an incident. So use these, think about these as advice beforehand, so you know the types of events that you're going to classify as a cyber incident, and you know how you're going to report it, and you get your legal advice to kind of check through all of that, and then you're ready. And this is all, we bring this out in what we call a tabletop exercise, John.
Yes, without a doubt. Tabletop exercise. The other thing I'm thinking about for municipalities and the smaller organizations, maybe you just have a head of IT or a director of IT or something like that. You should have, if you're the head of this organization, maybe you're the president or you're the mayor or you're the chief of whatever, that person who's in charge of your IT should understand what all this means already. And if they don't, we can have a conversation and we can, help you understand that and help you lay out a plan, because all of this has been happening, like I said, since 2001. So I knew that cybersecurity is a big deal and you're only as secure as your weakest link. So you have to keep preparing, and it's an ongoing process. It's not a one-time event. So
That's actually a good point. And I think many of you will already be subject to audits from the state. And those financial audits for the last 5 or 6 years have been asking questions around basic hygiene,
yes,
security, MFA on devices. So even though you might not have declared a formal cybersecurity program,
you might be doing a lot of it.
You're probably doing 80% of the most important stuff already.
Yes.
So don't get too scared by all of this.
Definitely.
So that's the legislation. I'm going to jump over this next slide, which is just here in case we had any questions on this.
So far, no questions. Okay.
If there are no questions, then we'll jump through here. You can read this in your own in your own leisure, and we'll talk a little bit around control frameworks. I think, John, you're going to take the lead now.
Oh, for sure. I love frameworks. I do them all the time. Seriously, though, the NIST cybersecurity framework, version 2, which is the latest version, is a really, I would say, mostly comprehensive framework for people to align to. It'll probably feel overwhelming for most people because it's got basically 190-ish controls. I don't have the exact number memorized, but the foundational layer of NIST CSF 2, which did exist in NIST CFS, the previous version, is the governance. And by governance, what we mean is policy. And policy is a requirement. If you want to stop people from sending out spam emails using your system, you have to have a policy that says, thou shalt not send out spam emails. Usually we call that the acceptable use policy. If you have or want to be able to control what sites they go to or what they're doing with computers, and you create a policy, beyond the acceptable use policy. You might have a policy that says your backups are run every Friday and that you're going to keep the last 3 months of it. Whatever your policies are that you want to have affected, you have to have that as the foundational layer. And then you do the other steps, which are identify. You need to know who's accessing your system. You want to make sure that they present correct credentials and things like that. You also want to identify the systems that you have, the hardware, the software, and the software as a service that you use. You want to protect all of it. So you want to make sure that only the right people are getting in. You want to make sure you have protections against bad people getting in, criminals and things like that. You want to be able to detect that those things are happening. If, systems are normal and nobody's breaking in, that's a good thing. Or we just had a weird event where somebody was scanning our network and trying to attack one of our systems that's publicly exposed. You want to be able to detect it. Then you want to be able to respond to it. So that's the planning part of it. How am I going to respond to an incident? And then you want to be able to recover. So these are the primary steps that are basically contained inside of the NIST CSF. And this will help you if you use the NIST CSF. I would imagine this would be good for organizations that are a decent size. And by decent size, I mean you have 100 employees, maybe 75. If you have less than 75, you probably don't want to use NIST CSF because it's going to be a bit overwhelming for you to maintain. And the other one we'll talk about is CIS Controls, the Center for Internet Security. But NIST CSF is good for those larger organizations.
Yeah, and this CSF came out of government. So NIST is National Institute for Science and Standards and Technology. Government entity, and it was built for helping with best practice for defending critical national infrastructure.
Correct.
And it's since grown, as John said, into CSF v2, and we find it applies everywhere. To me, John, what is really good about it is a risk-based model.
Yes. So
you don't have to do absolutely everything in it, and we'll talk about that in the 5-step program in a little minute or two. And then the other thing I'd say is, it used to be we built these really secure castles.
Yes.
Or keeps, and we were certain nobody would get in. In today's interconnected world, that is no longer possible. And so that's why there's this focus on detect, respond, recover, because you will be breached at some point in time is the mentality that you need to get into.
Right. The metaphor that people often use is a castle and moat strategy, defense in depth. So, if you think of the Middle Ages and castles, they would put a moat around their castle. The castle would have high walls. So you had a very hard exterior. And so people did the same thing for computer systems. You had a very hard exterior. And then what we unfortunately call sometimes the watermelon method of security, where it's, all of your alerts are green on the outside, but then somebody gets on the inside and there's no protection, no defense on the inside. So it's soft and chewy on the inside.
Or soft and squishy on the inside. Yeah. So what we want is we want to be able to detect when that squishiness is getting attacked.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll jump on to then, CIS Controls. Do you want to take the lead here?
Sure.
Or?
Happy. CIS Controls, I find for smaller organizations to be much easier to understand. As you can see, there's basically 18 areas, what they like to call the best practices, and there's sub questions underneath each one of these. But basically, you can look at this, and I'm not going to read all of them. But inventory and control of your enterprise assets. Do you know what you own? Do you know what's there? If you don't know what you own, if you don't know what computer systems you have, what data you have, you won't know what you have to protect. So you have to have a basic inventory, and you have to know what's, connecting to your network. And then it goes down through, your hardware assets, your software assets, how you're protecting the data, what are your configuration standards. And the nice thing is CIS Controls, unfortunately, a lot of systems are like, when you think about Microsoft servers and you just spin up a Microsoft server, it starts a lot of services that you don't need if it's only going to do one thing. So NIST CIS Controls has a hardened server version that you can use. And again, all this is free. You can go to their website and download it. And then, as you can see, there's 18 control areas that we talk about: penetration testing, incident response. And they come in 3 flavors. They call them IG1, IG2, and IG3. Implementation Group 1. That's when you're just getting started. So for those of you that don't have a formal cybersecurity program in place, you're going to start out with Implementation Group 1. And then as you mature in 12 months or 18 months or whatever, you go up to Implementation Group 2 and then finally up to Implementation Group 3. So for the smaller organizations that are watching this or watching it on Rewind, I would probably start out with Implementation Group 1. Yep. And it's very technical. It's like I said, easier for people to understand, and it focuses on physical things that you can do, clear, cut, and easy to measure.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like to say it's more of the technical guidance on what to do. It doesn't master so much into the risk management side of the house and the governance and the policy. There is a little bit of that in here. But I'm stealing your thunder, I think, from the next slide, John. So let's move on to the next slide and take a look at how these contrast and compare.
Yes. So when you think about it, as David was saying, CIS Controls is prescriptive, meaning you don't have to really think too much about it. You'll have to buy tools typically, and there are a lot of free tools available for implementing some of these CIS controls. Because certainly coming from the higher ed space, higher education is great in the sense that they are collaborative. It's not sort of adversarial. So they build tools and make them available for small and medium organizations to implement them. So CIS Controls is prescriptive, and NIST CSF, as David has said, is a risk management framework, and it helps you with the governance. As you get larger, it's also based on NIST 853, and for those of us that are literally in the weeds with this stuff, there's 800-171 and 853. Those are a very detailed list of questions to make sure that you're controlling access to information, the data that people are trying to steal or encrypt.
So, we tend to focus on that NIST CSF piece because of it's got that built-in risk management piece. And as we said earlier on around the legislation, you don't have to implement absolutely everything in this standard. And we'll talk about
some
that
of it won't even apply
how to select. Absolutely. So I think we're good on the control piece. How do we bring this to life for you?
This has all been lots of words. We've been saying lots of words, and so we need to get into the meat and potatoes for people.
Yeah, so we talk about a 5-step approach, and pretty simply, it's graphically shown here. Step 1, select a best practice framework that you're going to start off with, and then you look at that and you go, okay, so of the things this best practice is recommending, what are the actual gaps? What are we doing? What are we not doing? Where are we falling short of this standard? You then take those gaps in phase 3 and you use what we talk about as being threat intelligence, but basically technical news. What are threat actors doing? We always pick on Scattered Spider because it's such a lovely name.
And they've been so effective at their attacks.
What are they doing? How do they attack? How do they convince service desk or help desk people to give away access credentials? And you factor that threat intelligence then into, okay, based on our gaps, what are our priorities? What do we need to go and fix from a risk management? Where is our risk? And when we talk about risk, we often mix terminology, John. So
yeah, we do.
A risk, put simply, is a vulnerability, a control you don't have, plus a threat actor, that is going to exploit that vulnerability. So as you think about your risks and you talk about risk, it has to be both of those two things. Otherwise, you're just talking about a threat or you're talking about a vulnerability.
Right. And to expand on that just a little bit. So I'm a huge fan of multi-factor authentication. I've had MFA on anything I could put it on as soon as possible. And just a quick story. So I worked for a college that had a location out of the country. So I had a Gmail account. I had turned multi-factor authentication on before I had traveled to this other country. And when I landed there, I was in a library. I was getting prepared for a meeting. And I casually opened up a tablet that I had brought with me to read my email on Gmail. And as I closed the tablet, the meeting was getting ready to begin. I got a text alert. Someone had grabbed my login credentials, and if I hadn't had multi-factor authentication turned on, my account would have been compromised. So that was probably 2012, I think. And multi-factor authentication is what David and I would call a control. So you want to prohibit the wrong person from authenticating and getting your email. So you put a control in place to make it harder for them to, try to get into your email. That control is MFA. So one of the questions that you'll see from any of these frameworks, basically, do you have multi-factor authentication turned on? If you don't have it turned on, depending on the asset, so if you don't have MFA turned on for your email system, that's bad because then a threat actor can get the password, sign in, and do stuff as somebody else. They're impersonating that person. They could send ransomware notes. They could do lots of things. If you have a control that says it requires multi-factor authentication, you've limited the risk. And then you might have a system that's a kiosk for somebody you're in a visitor center. I love that as an example because, they would get money from the state of Ohio, but it's a small organization, pretty well self-contained. They could have a kiosk in their visitor center. Somebody could have a generic username and password, but the risk is low. I mean, okay, it's a PC. It has maybe even no connection to the internet, and the information is stale. It's not sensitive. So depending on the risk, you may or may not have to have multi-factor authentication for every asset that you're trying to control.
Thank you, John. Yeah. So you take those new controls you want to put out there. If it's MFA, if you don't have it, if it's monitoring of activity.
Yes, you're looking at your
on the
logs
network. Whatever the control is, from the standard. And then you move on to your roadmap creation. And really what this is about is an actionable plan to improve your risk stance. And that roadmap creation, my advice is get that done early. Get it done as part of the budget cycle, because some of these items are going to need budgetary cover to go out and procure new services, new items. If you're already outside of that budget cycle, which you're going to be at the moment, then take a look at the free resources. John is your past master at using these open source entities, and start to plug some of those gaps now.
Right.
So you may not be able to take the big ticket item
until
directly.
next budget year.
Yep.
But you've got it on your roadmap. But I think we have a question.
Yeah, on that topic, we do have a question that has come in. Thank you so much for submitting a question. The question to you today, gentlemen, is thank you. This is a lot of information. If I realize I have a gap in my CIS or NIST CSF, does CBTS have the capability to assist filling that gap?
Wow. Thank you for that softball. We appreciate it significantly. Nice and right over the center of the plate. Yes, we can definitely help you with filling the gap, as it were. It could be a gap in a particular control. It could be a gap in creating that roadmap. It could be a gap in assessing whether or not you have the controls addressed. So.
Yeah. And we also have what we refer to as managed services as well. So, if you take something that you need to do repetitively, perhaps a good example would be patching services. If you happen to have your own elements, or
patch your stuff.
you need some help with managing your Google or your Microsoft 365 environment. Then those run services, as I refer to them, are also available, and pretty clearly myself and John can then help with our other colleagues around assessment and the more strategic, how do you pull this plan together.
And it's interesting, we even do cybersecurity awareness training using some of our partners, and we can manage it for you. Because one of the requirements that both NIST CSF and the CIS Controls have is, do you have an awareness and training program? And by that, we mean something more than just your basic computer-based training where somebody clicks through a slide 5 times real quick and then, boom, they've been trained even though they haven't really understood anything that they just read. So one of the services that we provide is, managing that awareness and training program for you that's, designed to improve and both raise the awareness of your employees of the risks that are out there, as well as train them as what's good and what's bad in terms of phishing emails and things like that.
Yeah. So that service there particularly is good at what we call phishing simulation, which is basically sending emails out to get people used to thinking before they click.
Yes.
The other one, John, though, that I think we have to bring out at this point is the state of Ohio has the Cyber Range Initiative, and the state has, in this particular case, some really good, what would be free to all of all the audience here, actual specific training around cyber stuff. So there's a link to that later on as well. So what you'll see as we move things through from a CBTS perspective is, if there's a better resource out there, we're actually empowered to point you in that direction, which is what I really love about working for CBTS. So I don't know if we've got a follow-on there. If we have, then obviously bring it back in, please, Ryan. But we were talking about the roadmap creation here at step 4. Pretty clearly, step 5 is all about then executing that improvement program. Buried in there.
After you make the plan, please execute the plan.
Yeah. And then every period, commercially, we might do this every quarter. You really need to do this at least annually. You need to go back and take another look.
Yes.
And then it's just a continuous loop here. And when you take that other loop, best practice is also to have an external party come in and actually do an assessment. And again, link here to state elements. You may be able to call in the cyber reserve, and they may be able to do an assessment for you, and they'll definitely be able to do a vulnerability assessment for you.
Yes.
Or pretty clearly, grab a company, an audit company or a services company like CBTS to take we just call it an extra set of eyes.
Yes. And it's good. I've found when I was running my own shop for 24 years that I would warn the CFO or tell the CFO or tell the president or whoever that, these are risks. I'm trying to mitigate the risk. I need additional budget to get these things done. And then I would tell X, Y, and Z, CFO, I got to do X, I got to do Y, I got to do Z. And they would listen to me. They wouldn't pat me on the head, but sometimes it felt like they were patting me on the head. And then I would go away, and then I wouldn't get the money. But you bring in a third party, and suddenly the third party tells the president or the CFO, whatever, X, Y, and Z. And then, oh my God, we got to do this. This outside consultant told us to do these things. And it's, internally, you're the IT director. You're going, yeah, I told you that 6 months ago. Now I bring in a third party, and you're willing to do it. That's the way the game goes sometimes, unfortunately.
Yep.
But
yeah, and the third parties will also have access to industry norms.
Correct.
And what is the cost?
Average,
what is the cost of a breach? And so when we're talking about risk management, you've got to look at what's it worth? How much is it going to cost to avoid that $1 million outage? And I'm just using round numbers there, obviously, depending on the entity. So
yeah. I mean, I still like your example. The visitor center is not going to have $1 million outage, but a city or other local government could have a $500,000 outage just in terms of lost either revenue or downtime. And these numbers get very large very quickly. And it's a big stressor on your staff. If there's an incident, it is much better to be prepared and to prevent as many incidents as possible.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the 5-step program. Really encourage people to kind of utilize that as they think through this iterative approach of improving. It's not once and done, unfortunately, folks. This is an ongoing program.
Yep.
Just as things mature, IT systems change, people change, and the threat actors develop new ways of attacking us.
Yes.
Okay, so we just really briefly, when we do a piece of work like this, this is an example from a particular client slide.
Acme.
It'll take us, really the bottom part of this slide is the important bit. It'll take us about 2 weeks to gather the data, do interviews, understand what's in control, what controls are in place. It'll take us about a week of elapsed time then to kind of document those gaps. And then a further, week to 2 weeks. And so this is a part-time effort, if myself or John or one of our colleagues, does this, piece of work. But giving you a feel here that, elapsed time, somewhere between 3-4 weeks to 2 months, you should be able to step through an analysis of that analysis phase, steps 1 and 2 and 3 of the 5-step program, to set you up then for what are you going to execute going forwards in terms of the run and the improvement piece?
Yeah, and we've had really good success with customers of ours that have done the assessment, and they typically do it on a 3-year cadence. So when we do an assessment to help companies or organizations identify gaps, we'll deliver the report, and the report is the tangible output of the process, and that's in the final stage. And then we give a roadmap. So you get a 1-year roadmap. We think, based on our interviews with your staff and what we found, that you can get this accomplished in year 1, and this you can get accomplished in year 2, and here's what you want to start working on. And it'll probably take you 3 years. And then we come back in year 3, and we have seen tremendous success with organizations that go through this to improve and enhance their cybersecurity program. It changes the culture of the organization when people start thinking about cybersecurity. And I did this at my previous organization, and it took me literally 5 years to start to shift the culture from we're a wonderful open organization to, oh my God, people are trying to attack us and we have to be safe about what we're doing.
Yeah. So actually, I think, John, the next slide here, is an example report output that we've done for an entity. A little bit make believe. This is a bit of a mixture of two different. I think one of your clients and one of mine that we brought these together.
Yes.
But what you're going to need to do is you create this assessment, you create your roadmap. You're actually going to have to document it. So we've included this in here as a kind of as an executive way of documenting, this whole process. So John, I think you were going to take the lead on on this. Very deep. I would not take our clients and everybody who's on here right the way through this, everything here today, but perhaps we can give an overview.
Right. So real quick, so this is the executive page of the PowerPoint presentation that's delivered as the report, and it lays out what's the situation, and then the first part, the first third on the left hand side there, what's the situation. You're an organization that wants to take care of your data and you value your customers, and this is why you're doing it, and you're going to use this particular framework. And then this is what we found. That's the first part of that. And then the maturity assessment is based on the answers to the questions that we asked, based on the framework you selected. Here's where we want you to target. That's the green. And then here's what we found, and that's your score, in this case, in the orange level. And then this is, our recommendations. And sometimes it's a 60 to 90 day roadmap for those things that you're going to hit quickly. And then later on it'll be year two, year 1, year 2, and year 3.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd point out here is while the target maturity level, and when we talk about maturity, it's the CMMI normal 5-step
Carnegie Mellon maturity index.
Jargon seems to be part of
our life.
Risk management and IT. In this case, the target for this particular company, they were in a regulated space and they wanted a much higher level. We would normally see in most entities
3, the middle,
2.5 to 3, and it wouldn't necessarily be the same for all of these controls. They might want to have much better governance and not so good, sort of recovery, because they're a business that doesn't need to be instantaneously 24 hours on all the time.
Yeah, they're not an online. Yeah. And that's the one thing you want to think about too when you think about risk is it's contextualized to what you're doing. If you're Amazon or Microsoft or Google, you want to be up all the time. So you're going to want to have what they call 5 nines of uptime. That's great for them. But if you're a visitor center, again, really moving the scale down to the other end, you want to be open most of the time. But if you're down for a day, it's not the end of the world. I mean, you put up a sign, people will either get the information or they won't. So that's why the maturity level will vary depending on the organization. And you have to understand that to know what your target is, going back to how much effort you have to put in.
Yeah. I mean, the other example that I like in this space is, if you're a school district and you're using Blackboard and you've got online students, then that needs to be way more available and up more. I'm using loose words here, than perhaps your student enrollment system.
Correct.
Or your parent portal, where, I know the parents will scream, but if that's out for a couple of minutes here or there, then really,
or even for half a day, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it's not really going to take. It's just driving a different example than our poor visitor centres that we seem to be.
We're not beating up on them too badly.
Anyway, so just a report there in terms of how you might pull together your analysis and demonstrate your roadmap back to your legislative group or to your operations chief or whoever is overseeing the program. So I think this next section, we're going to drill into this a little bit because, boy, this is really dry. When you open up these standards, I have to say that
we won't spend too much time because we are cognizant of the time. So we've got 14 minutes.
But this really just bringing this to life. So this is just an example. It's one that hit me the first time I used NIST CSF V1, probably 8 or 9 years ago, if
It's been around for a while. Yep.
And you look at this sort of the category of identity management, and then the subcategory control is identities are proved and bound to credentials based on the context of interactions.
Yes.
Oh my goodness!
Doesn't that make sense to everybody watching?
I had no idea what proving was. I could joke and say, well, I knew what it was in a bread oven, but that was about it, to be honest. And in the old version of NIST CSF, there wasn't much guidance, to be honest. This is one of the things I really like, as well as the governance function around version 2, is that it then gives some examples. And the example, one is verify a person's claimed identity.
Yes.
So this is critically important in today's threat actor world, where people are masquerading, they're applying for jobs, and they're not who they say they are.
Yep.
I'm not aware of something in the local government space, but in the commercial space, we've got some really good examples of North Korean worker farms coming in, getting inside companies, and then launching attacks. So, make sure that you prove or verify that individual's identity. This is mostly done as part of a HR function, as part of the onboarding. And so I'm sure many of you are doing this today. But that's really what that was saying was, check a government ID that somebody's who they say they are. And you probably need to do this just in terms of the immigration law and the employment laws in this day and age.
And all that, yes.
And then the other example is issue a different credential for each person. No credential sharing. So yes, you're going to have those guest kiosks where you'll share some general logons. So that is okay. But for your workers, for your elected officials, please don't allow the admin assistant or the clerk to share the supervisor's judge's accounts. Is the other example where we've seen that. So that brings that sort of, what does this subcategory PRAAA02 sort of mean? And if you're in any doubt, then the standard then provides what it refers to as informative references. And in this particular case, it links out to what I think of as the kind of the gold Bible in terms of security standards. It's used in FedRAMP, it's used in other government stuff, which is this NIST 853
lots of controls
version. I think we're on Rev 5 at the moment of that particular control. And that really is a recommended reading to send yourself to sleep. So I would jump in there just to look at a reference and then come back out again and not try and consume all of that in one read. Because
again, all of these are available for free. You can download them. If you Google NIST, you'll see SP stands for Special Publication. 853 is the version there, and then the Rev. But as David said, if you just go there right now and you're totally unaware of this topic, you download it. It's not going to be straightforward. It's not going to be obvious what they're requesting or requiring that you do to meet the control.
Yep. So use it as a reference manual would be kind of what I would say. Like you don't consume if you're into auto mechanics. You don't read the whole manual from top to bottom. You've got a problem with the braking, you go to that particular chapter. So I would recommend doing the same thing here for 853. 100%. But it's a great resource. And if you're in any doubt around what does identity proving mean, well, you can see the highlighted text here. I'm not going to kind of read through that. And then it goes to yet another standard, which is the 863A, which gets into even more detail. So
about identities.
It's a whole chaining of data here. But the reason I added this into the slide, John, was just to explain how to use these. Yep. If this is your first time, sort of rolling up your sleeves and really understanding what best practice looks like.
Yeah, and for the larger organizations, think a good-sized city or municipality that has a team of people in the IT department. You can do this without consulting us. I mean, or consulting anybody, really. You can develop all this. The reference materials are there. So if you've got the staff, it has to be a project for them, because this is a project, or it's really an ongoing task. But yeah. It's great to give the people the background.
Yep. And I don't think we actually talked about it earlier on. We've not got any questions coming in here. So perhaps a little segue into that whole program management piece. One of the things I would really recommend is as you announce that program, you have to make somebody accountable.
Yes. 100%.
And whether or not that is, if you've got a senior IT director, or whether or not it's actually, I've heard a lot of counties choosing somebody from the operations division.
Sure. Not unusual.
As the accountable person. And then they're the one that then is going back to the legislature to report on what the program looks like. And then they become the figurehead where there is a resource allocation needed. So it's really important to get that buy-in, because you're going to need, as that example on identity showed, if you're not already doing proving, you're going to need buy into your personnel or your HR, whatever that entity is called, within your organization.
Right. And the other thing that, oftentimes I do see it as a chief operating officer or a director of operations. The other person that frequently will take on the responsibility, and you're completely correct that if nobody is identified as the responsible person for this program is going to go nowhere.
Yep.
The other person that it frequently falls to is the CFO, or a comptroller or controller or whatever, because there are dollar signs attached to some of these things that we're doing. Some of it's just documentation, which is just time and energy on somebody's part, where you're going to put a policy together that says these are the things we're doing. And I make this recommendation to the companies that I work with all the time. I know you're doing this good thing, just document it. And if you need me to document it for you, I will. But, the point is, and never, let's two things. One, if you're doing something, document it. That tells anybody like the auditor, this is what we're doing. And you can also put in the reasons why. But if you're not doing something and you say you are, that's worse. So only document the things that you're actually doing.
Yeah. So on that documentation side, actually, I think we can jump to the summary slide here, John, in terms of, closing this out, unless we've got, any other questions. Last chance for questions, please do throw those in there. The one thing we didn't touch on, because it's got this kind of legal piece, so I didn't want to put it in the slide, is public records.
Oh,
so
yes,
if you go back and take a look at this legislation, you may be a little bit fearful of documenting these holes and everything else. There is coverage in this legislation that those are not public releasable records. So don't feel afraid from a washing your laundry in public type of statement. About documenting where your gaps are, because you don't have to make it public, and that has been done very specifically so that the threat actors can't make those requests, gain access into your maturity, into your control statements, and understand where they can attack you.
Yeah, and that is very key, because people are like, well, I'm a low-level entity, I'm not that interesting to people. And I got that all the time when I was running my own shop. People were like, well, John, we're just a school. Who would care about us? I'm like, we're a target. Because you exist, you are a target. And the larger municipalities will be more attractive in one sense, because the threat actors or the criminals will think that they can get more money out of you. But regardless of your size, there's a whole host of technologies that are used by threat actors that are commodities. Think about your router at your house. If it's a vulnerable router, a criminal will take it over. They won't take it down, but they'll use it as a launching off point for something else. So even if you think, I'm a, not a school, but we're a small organization that couldn't be that interesting, bad news. Everybody's interesting to criminals.
Yeah, and I think, with AI and the automation that has enabled the threat actors to have, they're actually spraying and hoping now.
Yeah.
They might not even necessarily be targeting the particular entity. You might just get caught up in the automated attack mechanisms.
Right, and that's very true. And we almost made it through the entire presentation without mentioning AI. So I'd like to give ourselves a complimentary attaboy for that. But there are tools out there that are publicly available. If you want to look by city, by state, by county, for open Microsoft Exchange servers that have not been patched against a particular vulnerability, that can be done easily and freely by criminals or by people trying to help out. And certainly, if you have any system that's exposed to the internet, patch it, please. Just patch your stuff that's out there. And as David said, and I hope everybody understands this, when you document what your security program is, that part is, or you have an incident, that part is sensitive information that's not going to be, as he said, airing our dirty laundry.
Yeah. So if we've not got any other questions, John, I think, we just wrap up here in terms of closing notes. So, summarizing everything that we've gone through here, all entities that receive funding need to announce a formal security program. So, get busy with that. Start to engage if you've not already.
And it can be a one-pager.
It is
we're
just
not,
a very simple statement that you're adopting a program, and you might name who the responsible person is, and that's as
2 pieces of
Yep.
information. Exactly. I mean,
Yep.
so
Yep.
so don't sweat bullets that you're, oh my God, I have to download the NIST CSF or I have to go to CIS Controls and no. Step 1, just pick one, and then move forward from there and document it.
And then the second bullet here is, I've talked, I'm really, an advocate of this risk-based decision making. So, for me, it helps stop me jumping to the latest and shiniest
Tempting though that
technology. You look at just the number of vendors out there.
Yeah.
Think about everything from a risk-based approach and build a program appropriate, to your entity. In other words, tailor it. Do what's important for yourselves.
Exactly.
And then, the third bullet here is there are a great set of resources. They're linked. We're not going to go through all the links here, but
we might tease them and show them the links
as the elements are pushed out. Then, take a look at those. Use those, leverage them to the full extent. It is our tax dollars that are providing those,
Yes.
those pieces of advice and governance. So let's make use of it and not spend additional money.
Exactly.
And then, pretty clearly, if you do want assistance, as per that question earlier on, contact your account manager or jump onto our webpage and take it through. So do you really want to go into the dry links that we've got
Yes,
here?
we should show the links.
Okay, let's
because
see.
people
Let's
will
see
want
if
to
we
see.
have we can link through these useful resources. So a set of recordings, some very similar to what we've covered already today. A link to that bulletin 2025-07, so you can go and read that and get to the various details. I don't think there's anything else on here that we need to pull out. In terms of incident reporting, links here to how to do that to the Cyber Integration Center. And John, I think I'm more familiar with this. Are you good with
Yes.
me carrying on,
Please.
sort of talking
Yep.
through here? And so, links here on how to do that, further guidance, et cetera, et cetera. And then, for reporting to the auditor of the Ohio State, again, reporting forms, emails, and elements. And I think I've got a link here in terms of, you can go to Cybersecurity Ohio. They have published some frequently asked questions, some of which we have unashamedly brought into this conversation and checked that
Hey,
we
it's
were
our tax
aligned.
dollars at work.
Checked that we were aligning. The Cyber Reserve I talked about earlier on.
And people might not understand what the Cyber Reserve is. So, I mean, it's a volunteer group. Technically it's not even volunteer, but they start out that way. And it provides incident response and vulnerability scans.
Yep. And advice. People like John and myself that, are giving back to the community in effect initially, and then some are play it out. And then the training link. And I think that brings us to time. So, John, thank you for joining us here.
Thanks, David. This has been great. Hopefully it's been helpful to you. If you have questions, let us know.
Thank you.